Back live tonight, you're in Focus, and thanks for staying on. A $1 billion fund has been launched to finance South Africa's green hydrogen projects. This joint initiative was announced yesterday by leaders of South Africa, the Netherlands and Denmark. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte and his Danish counterpart Mette Frederiksen are in Pretoria on a working visit. For more on the benefits that come with such a fund and such an initiative, we're now joined in studio by Naphtally, Mafa, Managing Director of African Resources Development. We also have on the line Dr. Karen Surridge, a project manager at the South African National Energy Development Institute, as well as the South African Energy Forum Executive Director, Hlathi, Madela. Good to have you all, and good evening. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Good evening to you, Chairman. Good evening to the newsroom listeners.
Naphtally, let me start with you here in the studio. Why is hydrogen receiving such traction, even in South Africa at this time?
I always, sometimes I sound like a broken record, keep on repeating what I believe in. I think all the challenges that South Africa faces at the moment, hydrogen is probably one of the solutions that can address a lot of them at once. So in addition to what we have, so the opportunities that the hydrogen economy can bring to Africa, the way we look at it, and when I say the way we look at it, I mean that we look at it through a black eye, as in the relevance of the hydrogen to the continent or to the country.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Surridge, and there are a lot of things that we look at and we say this could be beneficial to the economy of South Africa, this could bring jobs, this could do great wonders. I mean, chief amongst them is the release of the spectrum. Even now, migration into digital is still a challenge. I mean, simple things like that, e-visas, something that apparently could change the tourism sector. Things like that, if we put them in place, they could certainly change the job situation in the country. Now we are saying hydrogen is going to do that. Why should we believe that South Africa will get that right in any way?
Thank you for having me this evening. Look, green hydrogen is most definitely, hydrogen as a whole, but green hydrogen in particular has most definitely got huge potential for South Africa into the future. It's not an instant or immediate solution, so we're looking in the 5 to 10 year range before it's fully commercial. But one of the things to remember is that there will be many value chains that spin off from a hydrogen economy being developed. Even just down to our actual exports that we have in place already, things like cement, fertilizer, steel. If those things are being produced with energy from hydrogen, and particularly green hydrogen, it intensifies that economy and makes us more attractive for export, which in any way builds our economy in this country. So when one needs to consider not looking through the lens of just the production of green hydrogen, but also the knock-on effect and the spin-offs that will be coming from developing that sector in the economy.
Yeah. So just on the production, if you just stay there, I mean, the 10-point plan of the president, for example, around energy security included the mounting of solar panels. And I had a conversation with one energy expert, and he said to me, he doesn't even know where we're going to get these panels, because in the country we currently don't have technology to produce these things. So we would have to go buy them elsewhere and bring them into the country in order to put them on roofs. Now we're talking about hydrogen. What is our potential to be able to produce it here? Do we have the technology to be able to do it here in South Africa?
We are already doing it in South Africa. We already have a very well-developed hydrogen value chain in South Africa in terms of producing hydrogen from natural gases and fossil fuels. What we're talking about is producing green hydrogen, which means, as you say, we're going to need to do it from renewable energy sources, so things like solar PV and wind and so forth. So you're asking particularly about the solar panels. At the moment, with the way that the electricity sector has been, you've seen a huge uptake of solar panels into the market, right from domestic use up to commercial use. So these solar panels are coming into the country. And yes, there will be a growing demand for these moving forward to feed into sectors like green hydrogen. Now, this is one of the spin-offs that I was talking about, is that we would be able to develop a local manufacturing capacity for things like the renewable energy technology hardware, wind turbines, the towers, the blades, solar PV panels, with different efficiency technologies and so forth. So this is most definitely part of the economy that's going to benefit from the green hydrogen, shall I say, revolution.
Yeah. But Madela, as the forum, when you hear, amongst the many problems that you and I tend to discuss on this show around electricity and generation and so on and so forth, when you hear that there is a fund that is being launched with Denmark, with the Netherlands, $1 billion for green hydrogen projects, what comes to your mind?
Well, good evening to you, Tawa, and the newsroom listeners, and to my fellow panelists. Look, what comes to my mind is that these are good investments, but they could easily be misdirected and they could easily be misunderstood because they come with a lot of stringent conditions that if they're going to have to flow to the economy, somebody's going to have to shut down something some way. And I think having the people who are proponents of green hydrogen like Karen and the other gentlemen that you've got there and people that are not here, I think as a country, I hear Karen talks about how this green hydrogen revolution is going to assist the country. I think we want to make it clear to say all technologies are relevant in their retrospect. What we need to do is to allow the green hydrogen economy to have its space. But we urge the people who are pro-renewables to say these green revolutions shouldn't come at the expense of the other industries. We're sitting here today without coal, there will be no electricity. At what point do you then say, in order for the money to flow into the green hydrogen, you have to shut down the coal? I think people like Karen, they have to go back to their colleagues and say, people like myself, Madela, I'm worried because I know behind that $1 billion, it will not flow up until you shut down a fossil fuel electricity generator to make way for it. Can it flow without us having to shut down the coal, Karen? Or anybody to answer that question? That's what comes to mind to me, Tab.
All right. And as we speak of that, I mean, I was trying to find the statement here now, but earlier on I saw a media statement coming from Eskom around the MOU, or at least that has been signed with the Netherlands, a letter of intent. And this is precisely around what you're raising, the closing of Hlathi and turning it into some kind of just transition project there. Do you envisage something of that nature coming out of these deals and these arrangements around green hydrogen?
Absolutely. That is what is happening, and that is worrisome. I'm glad that you're bringing the example of Hlathi. We actually have Komati that has been closed down. It used to be 1,000 megawatts. It's currently, well, I don't know if it's producing already, but at the time, will it produce in future? It will only give us about 270 compared to the 1,000 that we are getting from coal. I think the problem with the people who are pro-renewables, who are pro this green revolution, they don't realize that you could have Komati still powering that power station with coal as well as with the renewables. Same for Hlathi. This Netherlands money that is flowing to Hlathi doesn't have to come at the expense of closing down Hlathi. There's enough space there for them to do everything that they're wanting to do without necessarily having to shut down the coal part of Hlathi. I'm repeating myself like a broken record. Why do we always have to have a condition that in order for the money to flow to Hlathi, you're going to have to shut down the coal units? You don't have to close them. You don't have to shut them down. Just bring in the renewable and the agricultural component into it and try to optimize to have a bit of coal and a bit of that. But don't close down the other one. And that's where the disconnect is for us. We don't understand why do they have to close down these other ones.
Naphtally, let's bring you in here. Let's talk to this question of green hydrogen. And immediately when they say green hydrogen, my understanding is that it excludes grey and blue hydrogen, which have got a very strong coal component to them in terms of how the hydrogen is produced. But you know better. You tell me what it means, the emphasis on green hydrogen, and what that means, for example, for a resource like coal that we have.
I'm not going to talk on behalf of anyone. I'm not going to talk about the money coming from the Netherlands. Just to be frank, I like the Netherlands. They've got the biggest port in the world. I believe that we need the Netherlands as much as they need us. I'm going to talk about us. I'm going to talk about the BE company that has got a capacity and a technology, that own a technology that convert coal as we know it to green hydrogen. And I'm not talking in 5 years' time. We already launched our proposal to get access to the idling power stations, existing infrastructure. And this is why I started by saying that I am looking at it through a black eye. I'm looking at the relevance. I'm looking at what we need. I'll tell you what I see in South Africa now. I see a lot of coal. I see a lot of infrastructure. I see unemployment. I see uncertainty. I see a lot of misunderstanding among our community and among our people. I see a lack of electricity, and that affects our people badly. Yeah. So, and another thing that I see as well, this is us looking through a black eye. I see that people are trying to bring things and hope to get other things, let go of what they know in a hope of what they could get. But what I'm saying is, as South Africa as we are, the way we see it, our technology, we are saying this is our proposal, and it's been on the table for a while. We have lodged with the Infrastructure South Africa. We will talk to anyone. We would like to engage with anyone. We're not looking at 5 years' time, the green hydrogen availability. We are looking at about 18 months max of getting an existing power station. It's shut. It's sitting there idle, being turned into a farm, being turned into whatever. I don't know. So we are saying, give us that power station, the power station that's already there. There's no lead time. There's no capital required for that power station. We go in the power station, the one that takes coal. It's got everything. It's operating. It's got the skills already working at that power station. Yeah. Everyone is familiar with their environment. They know what they're doing at the power station. What do we do there? We take the same coal that has been feeding the power station, put it through our reactor and technology. We're not burning it. We're converting that hydrogen, harvesting the carbon out of the coal, right, converting into green hydrogen, and then what we do after that, we burn the hydrogen.
Yes. How does that happen without carbonization?
The harvesting of carbon out of the coal is the technology that's patented. Yeah. If I told you, I would have no job. So what I'm saying now is that we are going to take the coal.
Right.
We are going to keep the jobs in the coal industry. Right. We're going to reinforce the certainty and peace among our community that belong and rely on the coal industry. On top of those jobs, we're going to add another job through the hydrogen industry on top. Yes. We're not going to substitute. We're going to add. Those things are not supposed to be competing. They're all ours.
But tell me then, are you getting the ear of the government? Because DTI is announcing this project with the Netherlands. It's a completely different kind of project. The strategy and the approach that they're taking is completely different. Like I say, Eskom is talking about shutting down Grootfontein to turn that into some agricultural smart green project that would be linked to, of course, the production of hydrogen.
Well, we have lodged. We are following the process of the government. We are under the government. We elected the government so we can listen to the direction. Yeah. But we can't sit here and say that when things are not going well. At the moment, we've got no electricity, and we are hoping to export these solar panels and then go install them. It's funny how we are happy to adopt a certain principle that it's going to work. I haven't seen anyone who has put... The reason that solar panels are ideal for Africa is because we have got a very harsh, sunny conditions in the desert, among the Nama people just before the typical example of that place is Buchubai project. Yeah. Nothing grows there. It's a very windy area, and it is also very sunny.
That's in the Northern Cape.
That's right. Yeah. It's very windy, very sunny, and there's sand there. So what I know coming from an engineering background, right, is that when you've got wind and you've got sand that is loose and dry, the wind tosses around. And that then move around the sand into the solar panels. And what I've learned is that when we want to sandblast paint out of a car, that's what we do. We pressurize the sand and blast it. So I don't know what's going to happen with the solar panels. What's the life expectancy of the solar panels under those conditions? It's typical. It's ripe. It's a perfect area for solar generation. Yeah. That's why when you look at the Netherlands, you take one solar panel and put there in Boegoebaai, you will need about 3 to 4 of those panels to produce the same energy in the Netherlands.
Naphtally, let me bring in Dr. Surridge here. Dr. Surridge, the green revolution coming at the expense of what already exists when there are such technologies as what Naphtally is raising, where we can still turn the coal that we have in abundance and still produce green hydrogen.
Yes, well, I would not say that it's coming at the expense of the coal economy. So firstly, I'd like to say I agree with both of my co-speakers on certain elements. So yes, we have to have a symphony of energies. So we cannot rely just on renewables. But we also cannot rely just on fossil fuels. Why? Because fossil fuels are finite. We will run out of them. So we need to make sure that by the time we do run out of them, we have another energy resource that we can rely on. And this is why renewables are getting integrated into the grid. Also, one of the things to remember when we talk about the old coal-fired power stations like Rutte, like Komati, these power stations are already past their life expectancy. They are no longer efficient. They are costing more to run than what they can produce. And where do you think that cost ultimately lands? It lands on the electricity price. So these are stations that in any case are scheduled for shutdown. What they're trying to do is the just energy transition. Now this word and phrase gets thrown around a lot, the JET, the just energy transition. What does it really mean? It means exactly what my colleague Mr. Madela was saying, is we have to be able to transition, but not at the expense of the coal or the fossil fuel industry that's so well established in this country. South Africa is very good at burning coal, and we will still do it, trust me, for at least another 200 years, if not longer. So it'll be outside of both our lifetimes. We have enough coal to burn, but we have to become more environmentally conscious and more energy secure. And the only way to do that is to blend our energy mix. Now, if we have old-fired coal-fired power stations that are being decommissioned anyway, because they are no longer safe, they're breaking down, they require more expense to keep them running, and they're old-timers. Our new-fired power stations are more efficient. They have technologies that are more efficient, and they have lower emissions and therefore are more environmentally friendly. So what do we do with the old ones? Exactly as you say, there's a huge amount of skills and infrastructure in that area. And remember, all of those power stations, they're producing power. So they're connected to the grid. Now, it doesn't help if you're producing power somewhere where there's no grid. So if we are going to decommission them anyway, looking at things like my colleague who's in the studio is talking about bringing in a hydrogen production at one of these power stations. For electricity production, perfect, because you can get it straight onto the grid from there. Yeah. The same reason why they're looking at putting renewables down. We need to be producing electricity, but we won't be able to do it anymore from that coal-fired power station. So what else produces electricity? Yeah. Renewables.
All right.
So it's a matter of transitioning between energies, but ultimately ending up with a symphony of energies where we have all of them operating together. Hydrogen is not energy. It's an energy carrier.
It's a vector, so to speak. All right. But Madela, 3 issues being raised on the reliance on fossil-heavy electricity generation. One is that this is a finite product, so we'll run out soon. 2 is that some of these stations have passed their life, and so it will cost us more to be able to bring them to some kind of use. And therefore, we need this just transition and a blend of technologies.
Look, that's a very good talk. And if there was no electricity crisis, it would be 100% relevant, because we do need to introduce new technologies. The fact that renewables work, it's something to be celebrated, that here's a technology that needs to be allowed to come to the market and it needs to be improved. There's a lot of improvement that they've done, even a 1.56% increase. It equates quite a lot of a renewable solar in the solar panels efficiency. But one thing that we need to make sure of is that as a country, unfortunately for us, these technologies, they came at a time when we have the electricity crisis. And that is where we are saying that you need to strike the balance between allowing them to come in, but while at the same time doing the best that you can to acknowledge that as much as you know that these are finite resources that will be replaced in future, postpone it a bit up until you are out of crisis. I think you had a second question, which I just forgot that was relevant to that. What was the second issue?
It's a question of decommissioning past life fire stations, power stations, because they come at a cost. It's a costly exercise to try and keep those going.
So again, I'm not sure how true this is, but it appears to us that back some 10 years ago or 5 years ago, there was an expectation that by this time, these power stations will be costing us much more because they are old. They were looking at the components and the parts that needed to be replaced. But I can tell you now, there's not a lot of truth behind that, because power stations like Hlathi and Komati, they were renewed now in 2009, when we had that load shedding in 2008. In fact, they went to demothball them and they bought new equipment. So no one will tell you what exactly is the technical issue there, what exactly is old, what exactly is costing more. The problem with these power stations, they were envisaged that they were going to be closed down because they were old, because we didn't have a power crisis problem. But now that we have a power crisis problem, no one wants to ask themselves, what exactly is the issue? I don't buy the argument that they're costing us more. I would rather say perhaps they still require the operations and maintenance budget. I have not seen data that says because they are old, they cost much more. What I do know is that they were renewed. If they were renewed, someone needs to tell us what else now needs to be renewed, because they've just been renewed yesterday. I'm not trying to say that Dr. Surridge is lying or is misrepresenting fact. I'm just thinking that we are caught in the middle where there was an expectation that they would be closed down, but unfortunately we're in the middle of crisis, and where it's like they're expensive to run, perhaps it's something that needs to be thoroughly checked. Expensive to run compared to what? To diesel. Diesel costs us much more. Expensive compared to what? To having load shedding. Load shedding costs us much more. So one has to compare the cost of keeping them and the cost of not having them. Yeah.
Expensive compared to what? The cost of coal to hydrogen. How does it compare in terms of cost?
So I'm not going to go to the cost. I'm going to have to answer a few things that came up from the doctor there. There's few key words that I think we're talking past each other. Yeah. The first thing is that that's the one I want to start with, is that those power stations are old and past their life. There is a key word there that got left out. When you repurpose them, the first thing that you do is you refurbish them. Right? That's the first thing that you do. You refurbishment. There is also the second aspect is that there's a technical aspect missing of understanding how the conversion of the hydrogen and turning that into electricity works. Yeah. You're not going to use the steam. A lot of things that are redundant in the power station are not going to be applicable anymore that going forward from the technology that we use when we repurpose those power stations. Most of those things that maybe the doctor is referring to, that they cost more, they probably won't be making part of a new refurbished, repurposed power station anyway. But the hardcore, the solid infrastructure that is required, that takes long to develop, costs a lot of time and a lot of money to come to the end or to come to fruition are already there.
But right. Give us a typical example, conveyor belts that, for example, take coal from, they're connected to mines. Is that something that you say you would keep?
All those things are kept intact. Yeah. All those things are kept intact, everything, just about everything is kept intact, but the principle of generating electricity under the steam as we know it, it's very different from the hydrogen. So there's a lot of things that are going to be redundant out of the power station. And all I'm asking is, well, don't worry about everything else. Give me the power station. You already shut it anyway. It's sitting there idle. You don't want it anymore. I'm not interfering with anything. You've already done the environmental impact assessment. I don't have to go through all that. You've already done all the consultation with the communities. I don't need to do all the... I just need a little bit of time frame. I don't need a lot of money. Like, now we go in... The third thing again that I need to touch on is the cost.
Yeah.
The cost is gonna be more to make them run. Well, the solar panels. Look at the average life of a power station now in South Africa. It's about 45 years.
Yeah.
If you get a good solar panel, you're gonna get about 20 years out of it. So how many times are you gonna keep putting capital to replace those solar farms?
Okay, Naphtally, let's get them in quickly. Dr. Surridge, I'm going to come to you, but Madela, you raised your hand quickly there. You wanted to interject? Yeah.
No, I wanted to give a factual answer in dismissing that this power station cost a lot to maintain. Eskom releases the financial statements, and it continues to say all the average cost input of the coal power station is 43 cents a kilowatt hour. Nuclear is 10 cents a kilowatt hour. And when you go to the renewables, they are 223 cents a kilowatt hour. So if you put those very old power stations and the new one, you're still very much cheap because you're talking about 43 cents a kilowatt hour compared to the renewables that we are told now the new ones are costing 87 cents, 60 cents. But the coal together still costs 43 cents today. So there is the answer that this narrative that they cost more to maintain is not reflected on the financial. In fact, it's the opposite, because coal is the cheapest one after nuclear, according to the Eskom financial. That's what I wanted to say.
All right, Dr. Surridge?
I think we're taking too much of a literal direct approach when we talk about the cost. If we consider our export markets, a lot of South Africa's economy is based on our export markets, and a lot of what we export is things like, firstly, our coal, steel, fertilizers, things like that. Now, what's going to happen is, what's already happening is Europe is refusing to import any products that are not carbon neutral or tending to carbon neutral. You get hit with a lot of carbon tax. So that you can probably sell them, but you're going to get hit with a huge amount of carbon tax. What is that going to cost the economy? Now, we're talking about shutting down coal-fired power stations. It's inevitable that they will reach end of life. It's also, we're talking about costs between renewables, coal, nuclear, and so forth. Those are our three main energy sources: renewables, coal, and nuclear. But the cost comparison that we're doing, I don't think at the moment is indicative of what it's really going to cost the country. Yeah. I'm still standing by what I say, that we need all three sources of energy working together. And it's not an either-or scenario. Right. It's an everything-and scenario that we can develop our economy and still reap the benefits thereof.
Yeah. Let's explain the technology a little bit of this carbon-neutral hydrogen and how that will be achieved.
It's some guys sitting in London earning money from us for doing nothing.
Dr. Surridge?
I won't comment about that. But
carbon trading is somebody sitting in London benefiting from the economic activity that is happening in Africa. They are trading carbon, which they are not producing anything. They're sitting in aircon buildings trading carbon, which is happening elsewhere.
Sorry, sir. Yeah. I really don't know why we are still going back to the carbon. We have already qualified the carbon part. Yeah, Mr. Mdluli, we have. We have already said that we are going to produce electricity out of the refurbished power station. Right. Green electricity. Yeah. And when we do that throughout South Africa, everywhere in all these power stations, all of a sudden South Africa has got enough electricity, enough green electricity, enough clean electricity. And what that means is that now we're starting to spread. We've got visions about going to produce the green hydrogen in the coast. We also need electricity to go and do construction of those desalination plants. We also need electricity and time and money to do all those things. What we need to do, we need to secure the electricity of what we need now. When we have done that, and it's easily done by going and get power station, existing power station, with a very, very short lead time.
Yeah.
Refurbish.
You're not considering the question of imports and the fact that it's not necessarily a carbon neutral product that you'll be producing. Yes, the product will be green hydrogen, but there is a footprint of carbon that you will engage in on the build-up to the actual production.
Mr. Mdluli, don't let things that comes in impact on your own critical thinking.
Yeah.
You are getting told by these carbon emissions. What you are not getting told is there's scope 1, scope 2, and then scope 3 carbon emissions. What you are believing now, and everyone is believing that, they are sitting here telling me that a solar panel is green. You know why? They're saying green because the solar panel scope 3 is not getting looked at. The solar panels that we have now are getting made in China. And the last time I was in China, there was no any electricity coming from renewable. All the power electricity that runs the factories in China are generated from the coal. So why are we not going back and look at scope 3 of those solar panels? The same way we are judging now the hydrogen that comes from the coal, because that is scope 3, that is the source. And if you want to talk about that in mining, scope 3, all the minerals then will need to be judged the same way, because we are still mining gold, we are still mining copper, platinum and all those with diesel engines and everything else. What about that? Why can't the same practices of that is judged or assessed under scope 1, 2, 3 apply to everyone? If we're going to do that, I am asking that let's then look at scope 3 emissions of the solar manufacturing and the wind turbines and where they come from. And I will tell you then they won't be green, because then the third scope is looked at there now that is getting looked at on the hydrogen. It's not getting considered. I suppose it's great
there's that, Dr. Surridge, none of the renewables, if we are going with that debate, are carbon neutral.
It's not a debate, it's a fact.
Yeah, scope 3 comes into place, and when you look at that carefully, there is, of course, carbon that is involved in the production of those energies.
There is carbon involved in everything. We are carbon-based life forms. So let's not be delusional about that. When we say carbon neutral, in fact, I had this discussion with colleagues last week at one of the institutes, was how do we really sort of quantify carbon neutral? When we say carbon neutral, we're offsetting what we're managing to save with what we're having to use. But what we're not saying in all this discussion is, sir, I don't know how your technology works, but what are you doing with all the carbon that's coming out of the coal while you're extracting the hydrogen for energy carrying?
What makes you think that the carbon is coming out of the coal? I'm saying that I'm harvesting the coal. So you can't tell me about our technology, Mr. Mdluli. I refuse to be told about my technology.
No, before we come to it, but Dr. Surridge, I asked you the question earlier on to say, what technology are we proposing here as far as green hydrogen is concerned? My little reading says there's some electrolysis that needs to take place where we separate, we split the hydrogen and the oxygen. What does that require?
Electricity. A lot of it.
A lot of electricity.
And water.
And water.
And
do we have those in South Africa? Are we able to say confidently we'll have enough electricity to be able to carry out these projects?
Ask about the efficiency of a desalination plant.
No, let me put it this way, Tabo. The concept of capitalizing on renewables and hence calling green hydrogen is when you have a lot of sun and when you have a lot of wind. During that time, when there's too much wind coming from the wind farm, the farms, and there's too much solar, and on a good day, and you've got this surplus energy, you take that and you go and split the water molecule to produce hydrogen. Okay. But you don't produce the hydrogen when you are having an electricity shortage. Exactly. You prioritize all your wind and solar to supply us the electricity that we need.
That make the country
but also before I can go.
Yes.
In Europe, they have described nuclear and coal as green. We must be careful when we talk about the green in our part of the world, because the first world nations, the matured economies, the first world economies have struggled to define green outside gas and nuclear. They've even gone to the European Parliament and said, please allow nuclear and gas to receive the same level of treatment from the financiers, because without that, we are dead as nations. So here, when we talk about green, we must understand that in the Eastern Cape, you will have wind, you will have very little solar, but it's a perfect place for nuclear, and we are procuring nuclear in this country. So it's time that we unpack this green and follow the leaders, which are the first world economies, and say our green must also include nuclear. Because right now, these green people, they think everything that is green doesn't include nuclear. Yeah. Whereas in Europe, it includes nuclear. Thank you.
And therefore, I'm asking myself the question then, Dr. Surridge, if we are to be honest with this particular deal, as that Bob Madela was saying earlier, are we not tying ourselves up to something that is a limitation for us before having had these conversations about what is really green and what is really carbon neutral in our context, and what we have and what we need to achieve as far as electricity is concerned?
Yes, so that's exactly what I was saying, is what do these definitions actually mean? And it really boils down to a balance. It's like a balance sheet of moving carbon around, of accounting for it in different spaces. So producing anything will leave a carbon footprint. But how do you offset that against the electricity production, for example, from that technology? But just back to my original point, is that it doesn't have to be either or. It can be as well as. And in the electricity constrained environment that we're in at the moment, where we are struggling with getting enough electrons on the grid at all times, we shouldn't be picking either or. We should be picking anything that works and that's economically viable and good for the country. And I think all of the technologies have value there.
And this is brilliant, because in Europe they're talking about replacing the coal power station with a small modular nuclear reactors.
Yes.
In some parts they're talking about replacing them with the gas-powered turbines. Yeah. So I'm very happy with the way your attitude, Sanedi. But your colleagues in the renewable energy industry, they are not like you. I don't know why.
All right, Naphtally?
I'm in the energy industry.
Tell us a little bit more about why you're saying your technology is best in terms of securing our energy needs right now.
So the energy, it's very simple, Mr. Mdluli. The first thing that I said when we started, I said we've got an existing infrastructure. Right, we've got the labor force, we've got the coal, and then all we need to do is to take the emissions out of it.
Yeah. So and no jobs will be lost.
No job will be lost.
Not a huge amount of money needs to be invested.
Not a huge amount. Yeah. Not a long time.
Not a long time.
That's correct. Right. So when we do that, we are looking after the immediate needs. We are looking at what we need. But when we do that, we're not now backing off our climate commitment. We're not cowboys. Even if I'm not a scientist, I wouldn't know how much evidence has been provided about this climate, whether it's just a hype. We used to have global warming, and then all the ozone was getting destroyed, and now it's coming back together.
Nothing wrong with carbon dioxide.
Yes. So I need to go back to where I was. So when we do that, we capacitate. We make sure that South Africa itself has got electricity. As we speak, I'm from Limpopo. I'm from Amuja Jibulobedu. As we speak, there are people with no electricity.
Yes.
No access to electricity. Yes. Right? So we are talking about clean. And they're thinking, what are they talking about? They have not seen the electricity yet. And we are busy cleaning it. Which one? Right? So what I'm saying, let's do that. Let's get the electricity in South Africa. Let's get the mines operating. Let's get the revenue out of the reliability. And then after that, we can do that concurrently. We start developing we want to produce the solar panels. I am not against the solar panel. I don't want to be misunderstood. Yes. I'm not against the solar panel. Like I said, I'm from Limpopo, so it doesn't mean that if you want to have cows, you're going to have to get rid of the donkeys. You can have all those things. They feed on different food. They serve different purposes, but they can collaborate. I am saying let's respect each of those items and maximize of what we need. The Netherlands, we need the Netherlands because it's a huge port. When we've got hydrogen, when we have worked out, you have to remember, we haven't worked out how to transport hydrogen efficiently.
Storage,
and cost. That's right. So, but we believe that in due course, those things will be sorted. We're not going to wait here and wait for that to be sorted, then we start. So we're going to be ahead. We're going to be developing all those hydrogen hubs in the coast and getting ready for when the time comes. By the time we finish constructing, we're happy to export. That it's a big revenue. But you can't be looking at exporting the hydrogen while our people now here have got no electricity. They're very hungry. They're very angry. Nothing works. The country needs to work and be self-sufficient and then look outside. Seek ye first.
Let's leave it there. Dr. Karen, Naphtally and Madela, much appreciated. Thank you very much for joining us for this conversation tonight. In Focus continues shortly with what's making news tonight. Stay with us.